No, the rope. Yeah.
We kind of just see the bottom of your tunic. So if you've got greaves or something, we're not seeing it.
No, we don't do no greaves.
No greaves.
It's not grease.
But I have sandals.
It's okay. We'll
You have Kaligas?
I do.
Yes,
I am.
We're kind of Roman reenactment without Cali guys.
We're going to war after this, by the way.
Yeah.
I think the Parsians are at the door.
Yeah. Let me know if you need some slaves for the house, Paul. I'm good at that. Make sure that this, because it's not tied on.
So Sergio, how come you're not dressed up?
Because it's an experience. I do this all the time. I want someone who doesn't know and doesn't experience it to see it for the first hand. That's what it's about. It's hopefully I'll get you down to eventually do the same, Paul. We can do some hop live and spawn stuff.
By the way, this is a really out of shape soldier. Don't.
We noticed.
No comment.
It's not exactly, figure flattering outfit.
It's okay. We're at the more advanced areas of Empire where the food is plenty, as you can see.
A lot of people don't know, but they opened up a Chick-fil-A in 2nd century AD, and a lot of legionnaires went there.
Yeah, you look kind of like
McDonald's
Pompeii.
just the same age.
Exactly. Burger King's been around since I think 3rd century.
That's right.
You look like Pompeii coming out of retirement.
Hi, everybody. Today, we have a presentation on Roman soldier reenactment. And the presentation is basically set up mostly by Sergio. And I'm going to be basically one of the exhibits in Sergio's presentation. And this is a History Most Ancient group. We do have posted it in Robert's group as well. Let me just introduce myself. I'm an organizer of the History Most Ancient. We have a YouTube channel called the History Fitness Investing. If you could just join and subscribe. But I'm in finance. I'm in no shape or form a professional, but we enjoy this. And let me introduce one of my presenters, Sergio. He's one of the original founders. Go ahead, Sergio.
Hi, everybody. Great to have you. We're so thrilled. Today, we're going to be discussing the life and times of the Roman soldier in this semi-reenactment. My name is Sergio Martinez, and I love different periods of history, Roman, medieval, and 16th century. So let's begin.
1 second. Let me just start the record button.
All right. So we all heard of the Roman army, arguably one of the most powerful militaries ever. Okay. And they would conquer anywhere between 2.2 million square miles by the 2nd century AD. Okay, from North Africa to modern day France to Syria to the British Isles. How were they able to do this? With their swords and shields? Not quite. They had a combination of logistics, engineering, and of course, more important than anything, discipline. So today, my friends, we're going to try to cover some of those areas, as well as Zach is going to walk into the shoes of a legionnaire that we believe is from the 1st to 2nd century AD. Now, that being said, why that particular period in history? That's when many people believe the army was at its height. That's when they reached their peak. Also, we have a lot of information from that period in time. Now, that being said, take everything I say with a little grain of salt. There's always things that are being rediscovered, revisited. So some of the stuff might be theories. Some of the stuff has backed with archaeological evidence and so on. So I'll put some of my sources at the end of the presentation if anybody has any questions. So let us begin. So here, Zach is dressed as a soldier from around 1 to 2nd century AD. He has his helmet, which is called a gale. Typically would have been made of bronze or iron, okay? It's got the signature cheek plates to protect that part of the face. It's got a back plate to protect the neck and upper back. And it's got this brow here. In the event that he was to be attacked by an enemy, the blade would hit the brow first, which would act as a shock absorber, okay? That's a standard helmet that most of the Roman soldiers would have had. Now, for the body armor, he's got the armor known as the lorica hamata. what that is basically a chainmail vest. Okay, now chainmail, just to give you an overview, it's a very pretty much a series of rings that interlock with one another to make a fabric, if you will. It actually offers a lot of protection. We don't know who started chainmail. Chainmail's been around. I mean, the Persians used it, the Romans used it, the Celts used it, the Vikings obviously used it. Many people using chainmail. It's effective armor. And each one of these rings, normally, this is not the best reproduction, but they would have had a rivet in each one, giving it extra support. Okay. To the bottom, he's got his beltius, which is, we're not sure if that's standard issue or not. And he's got his sword, the signature gladius, which we'll talk more about in a minute. On this side, he has his fugio, which is dagger, as you see on the side here. And then underneath that, he'd have a wool or a linen tunic, okay? Typically, it would have been red, but it wasn't always red. People associate the Roman army with red as their primary color. And I like to think that was a common color, but we know that they used all types of colors, from regular natural white to even blue, brown, and so on. But red would have been probably their preferred color. They had capabilities of dyeing using natural dyes with madder plants that made a red very close to this. Maybe not as red, but who knows for sure. Now the scutum, which was the standard issued shield, was also an iconic piece of the Roman soldier. I mean, they always went on campaign with these, and they would go into battle with these shields in these positions, forming a shield wall. They would fight in columns, as many have probably seen in TV shows or documentaries. And it was a very effective shield. It was made of plywood, many layers, giving it a protective advantage. And the same thing, it had a concave shape, showing the inside of it. Yeah. So you see, it almost covers the good part of the body, which is a very good shield. Now, there's a reason why the sword is where it is. No, yeah, exactly like that. Right like this. Yeah, exactly. Most of the time when you're having a sword, you would want it on the opposite side of the arm to use. For example, if I'm a righty, I want the sword on my left, right? I want to draw it on the other side so I could take on the enemy. If I was a lefty, vice versa. But here, the Roman legionnaire had the sword on the actual side of the arm he's using. In this case, it's right. And reason being is because if he had to draw it, like I just explained, he'd have to open the shield, grab it from this side, and then now he's not protected. Furthermore, remember, he's got a soldier to his left and to his right that he was going to hit him, and they will hit him as well. So this is why he draws the sword. Go ahead, draw the sword like this. Yes, and then move forward. Yeah, exactly. That's actually more like this. You should have heard that. But anyway, that's really why the legionnaire would have the soldier on that side of the body versus the opposite side, which normally in history we'd have it on that side. So you can put that back. And last but not least, we'll talk about the military boot, which is the Kali guy. I have it here to show you. This is again a reproduction of the Kali guy boot. I just put these little paper in there so you get an idea. Many, actually 2 strips of leather. Typically, this would have been made of pig hide or goat. And then there would be hobnails underneath them. These are very rusted, but you get the idea. This is obviously for traction as they would march for long periods of time, as we'll discuss later. And they would be in the terrain. They would be in all types of regions where there would be muddy waters, mountain, dirt, sand, and what have you. So this was a very, very important feature of the Roman legionnaire, okay, the Kali guy. And Zach's got a pair right now, but you can't see it. So that's pretty much how the structure of or at least the equipment for battle the legionnaire carried. Now, another thing is, we'll discuss the enlistment. At this point in history, Rome is an empire, right? Ruled by one man. But we're going to go back a little earlier to understand how the army was structured and how the enlistment worked. In the Republic time, in the Respublica, if you wanted to enlist, what?
No, it's okay.
Okay.
I just wanted to increase the screen.
If you wanted to enlist, you could put this to the side like that. Yeah, perfect. If you wanted to enlist in the military, there were some requirements that needed to be met. Not everybody could just join. Number one, obviously, you have to be a male, okay? And that we know all throughout time. Number two, you have to be a citizen. Not everybody in Rome was a citizen at the time. We'll talk about more of that later. And number 3, this one's interesting. You had to own property. That's right. The army was made up of landowners. In fact, to acquire land, you had a civil duty to serve in the military or have somebody serve on your behalf. Okay. Look at it as owning a house today and paying property tax. The way they saw it then, compared to our modern minds, is that who best to defend the land than those who own a piece of it, right? They had skin in the game, and if they want to protect that's rightfully theirs, they need to defend it. Okay, this was not voluntary; this was mandatory, meaning you did not get paid, and you also responsible for providing your own equipment, your own armor, your own weaponry. If you were fortunate enough to own a horse, you would be part of an elite group of soldiers called the Equus. They were like a cavalry unit. And they were very elite. Yeah, questions. You want to read the questions?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can we see the back of the armor? How is it tied on? Very menacing. This is a fantastic mini group. Okay. They want to see the back.
Yep. 1 second. Let me just go back. All right. Go ahead.
Okay. So yeah. So this is basically another layer of protection. Obviously, it's like another coat of mail armor, of rings. This would protect, obviously, its back area. And obviously, would add more weight. But that's pretty much how the back would have looked.
So you have to pull it on over your head, right? It's got no seam. There's no seam in it. You have to pull it on over your head like a nightshirt.
The whole entire armor?
Yeah. The shirt itself, in order to get into it, you have to pull it on over your head. There's no.
Yes, correct. It's one piece. Yeah, it's one piece that you would you would put on like a tank top, let's say, but it was made of metal rings. And Zach can tell you how easy it is to put on.
It's very difficult.
Yeah. Now, typically, these male shirts would have ideally, just armor in general, it works better if it's made tailored to your body. Right? We have to think like it's not like a wool or linen where if it's a little baggy or a little bigger, it's okay. But here, if you have more excess material, which in this case is going to be iron rings, it's going to be a lot more heavier. Hence, it's going to slow you down. So you don't necessarily want that. That being said, you also don't want it to be too tight. Otherwise, it's going to restrict your movement. So ideally, you'd want this tailor-made. I don't know if the Roman soldiers had it tailor-made. That sounds a little bit too robust for such a large group of soldiers, but we like to think that most of the armor would have fit them ideally. We know that the average soldier was what, 5'1"? Yeah, around 5'1", 5'2", or 5 feet. That's not very tall. I'm 5'4", so we'd be tall soldiers. We'd be giants, But anyway, I hope that answers the question about the armor. Yeah, it is effective armor, but it's not easy to put on. Or put off easily. I guess if you do it enough times, it becomes. But yeah, it's something that you have to like really get used to putting on and stuff like that. Most likely, you're going to need someone to help you put it on and get it off. All right. So where was I? Yeah, go ahead.
Question about how you kept it from. There's a question about how did you keep the armor from rusting?
Great question. Okay, so ideally, they would have to maintain the armor all the time. Obviously, we know that. Iron oxidates far more than bronze. So they would oil it up with olive oil. If it did rust, they would actually put it in a barrel with sand and then they would roll it around. This would act like a washing machine. The little rocks in the sand would scrub it off. It was very, very tedious work. But the idea was that never to let it rust. In fact, that was like one of the requirements as a soldier, and their commanders would supervise that their armor must be shiny at all times, whether it be bronze, iron, or tin. So that was something they tried to avoid as much as possible.
Another question, Sergio, is how is the chainmail different from chainmail in the Middle Ages?
Okay, well, not much. Obviously, in the Middle Ages, we have a more longer sleeve part, or sleeves, because they don't really have sleeves. And there'll be different size rings. Typically, the Roman one around this period would be, the rings would be 6 millimeters. But not much different, at least not to my knowledge. They would still use iron. Perhaps as we get into the 14th, 15th century, when they start to develop steel, obviously the armor will be a lot stronger and more resilient, perhaps a little lighter than iron, but I would say not by a whole lot. That's my guess.
Didn't the Romans have steel?
Good question. When we say steel, what is steel? Steel is an alloy, right? It's a mixture of carbon and iron. When you mix those together, you get steel. Now, we have to think when they were forging armor, or anything for that matter, tools, jewelry, hinges, at some point, the carbon from the coals, from the forges would have entered the iron, hence making it steel by definition. Now, is it the same steel we'll see in the 16th century when they're able to make these fine plate armor like in Milan and Oxford, Germany? No, I doubt it. Did they know it was steel? Probably not. So my guess is they had steel, but it was so unrefined that they would have considered it iron because they had so many impurities. So yeah, I would say
they must have known that by hammering it, it becomes harder and holds its edge better and so forth than just iron coming out of a forge.
Correct. Interesting. Are you referring to quenching when they take it in the hot temperature and then dip?
No, I'm saying that the raw iron coming out of a forge as opposed to working it, and that's how the carbon gets incorporated.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Into the iron, and they did do that.
Correct. Exactly. For working it into, putting it into the shape, hammering it, as you explained, it was inevitable that they would have eventually came across a different type of metal. So, but very few, now at least I'm not aware of their advancements in steel, like when we think of steel in in the medieval period. But anyway, getting back, do we have another question?
No, that's it.
Okay. So as I said, the army was mostly were made up of landowners. Okay, the way they saw it is that, well, if you want land,
I have a question. How long was the enlistment to the army, and then what was their pension like?
Okay,
what did they do once they got off?
Okay, I was going to actually talk about. So we'll talk about that in the reforms. I have the answer to that. Well, at least I have the answer. Okay, so as I said, the army was made up of landowners. To enlist, you have to be a citizen, you have to be a male, and you had to own property. Okay, and you had to be responsible for your own equipment and your own armor, and so on and so forth. Now, this worked for a while, but eventually, around 102 BC, a controversial general came around. His name was Gaius Marius. I'm sure you heard of him, and he pushed for some necessary changes. Now, these ideas were already around, but he takes the credit for finalizing them. Okay. And this would be known as the Marriage Reformation. And one of the things he did was he removed this land requirement to enlist in the military, okay, which was a huge game changer, as you can imagine. Two, he made it that each and every soldier received a salary paid for his services. Before, remember, it was mandatory and you didn't get paid. And three, the state would provide them with the weapons, army, equipment. Although they were deducted from the soldiers' pay, it didn't matter. Now we had a professional army, okay? And there was even incentives. Now a soldier that had no property can enlist for 20, 25 years, depending on different time. They change. Sometimes it's 20 years, sometimes it's 25 years. It's different for the auxiliaries. Then they would get their pension. And in some cases, they would be given a portion of faraway land from another region of the Roman territory. And that land they could use to farm on, they could rent it out, they could even sell it. So it's now you could go in with no property. You just have to be a citizen. That never changes. You always have to be a citizen. And you can enlist, get a pension, get salary while you're on service, and you get a portion of land. So you can become a landowner after retiring from the military, which was a huge thing. Any questions?
Yeah, Paul, can you read the question? Sorry.
Yeah, let's see.
Paul?
Yeah, I got it. I would think that soldiers would not wear this armor all day long on campaign, correct? If true,
correct, yeah.
Individual soldiers carry their own armor, or would a platoon all put their armor in a wagon or on a horse? Between
Great
battles?
question. Okay, yeah, that actually coincides with my next topic. So keep that question. So as I said, they now reformed it, okay? And now it's going to be more of a professional army. Sounds good, right? Not quite. You see, before they would only meet in the summer months. Now we have soldiers full time around the clock on the payroll, and there's not much for them to do, right? They can only train for so much, and they're not going to wars 24/7, right? So now we have a group of soldiers that are standing around not doing much, and we know that if you don't keep people busy, they get demoralized, perhaps even bored, or they get into trouble. So anyway, so the army decides to keep these men busy. And what they're going to do is they're going to give them projects, building projects. And they're going to start building stuff like palisades, bridges, walls. And the thing they build the most is the Roman roads, right? That's like one of the most iconic Roman structures. And this is very important because this will now allow the army to travel in different parts of the empire, right? So they had a really great system with large stones on top and gravel and sand in the bottom. And it's caused mainly because if it rained, the gravel and sand would drain the water, avoid flooding. And yeah, they had a wonderful system and a very complex, integrated highway of roads all leading up to Rome, and estimated about 248,000 miles of Roman roads were built by the end of the 2nd century. Okay, just wrap your head around that. Just the Earth is what, 24,000 miles of circumference, so they have about 248,000 miles of Roman roads, all built by hand, all built by the army. Okay, this was a major part. So were they using the armor and campaign? No. Now this is one of their main tools, the dolabra. I don't know if you can see it. It has a case here. This is a very underrated item. It's not a weapon. Okay, Romans do not use axes. Okay, it goes against their style of fighting. This is simply a tool. It's basically obviously a pickaxe. You know, you chop down wood. You can entrench things with it. It was used a lot. In fact, this is a replica, obviously one. But the actual ones that were found actually had this little case on here. Okay, now why? Why would they put a little case here? We don't know for sure, but the fact that we have something like this on and a common tool tells us that this was a prized possession. This meant something to the legionnaire. He used this quite often, and it was important because, like I said, they were working constantly. You could say that he spent more time as a builder than actually a warrior, the Roman soldier. So they were definitely working constantly with hammers, axes, pickaxes. They had many engineering tools. I mean, they were professional in that sense. They had engineers, land surveyors, and stuff like that. So one of the reasons now, when they weren't when they weren't building, they were marching. Now, to answer the question the person asked earlier, before the Reformation, they had huge supply chains with animals and wagons carrying most of the supplies, okay? And that Marius thought that slowed them down. It was too much. He thought that if he reduced it and only carried the things that they really needed, and he made the soldier himself carry it, it would improve the army. And although the soldiers initially weren't crazy about that idea, it proved to be a very successful move. So here we have a furca, okay? This is the rucksack or backpack of the Roman legionnaire in those days, okay? As you can see, the word furca basically means fork in Latin, because originally it looked like a Y-shaped pole. They must have took a branch that had like 2 prongs and they made it like that. Eventually they'll make a crossbar, as you can see. And here he has his sack. We don't know exactly what the contents are, but we want to believe that he would have had maybe another change of clothes, another tunic, because remember, they would march around it for many hours. They'd work for hours in hot sun. Another change of socks, perhaps another caligae. This was his cloak, but it also doubled as a blanket for at night. A canteen of some sort, which he would have put either water or oil, okay? And there were more things like that. He would actually even have the dolabra on here as part of his pack, okay? So Zach is now going to put that on there, carry it. In addition to his kit, the Roman soldier had this weapon known as the pilum. Can you see that? Everybody can see that? I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, Paul?
Yes, yeah. We see it just
okay,
fine.
So what this is basically a javelin. It's not a spear. It's made to be thrown. It's a one-use weapon. You could say it's kind of like an advance, a preemptive strike, let's say, when they're going to march and engage on the enemy, and they see an opportunity, they're going to all throw these at the same time. And the object of this weapon is to the soldier, the enemy, would obviously have a shield. If he doesn't have a shield, he's really in trouble. It will pierce the shield and hopefully break an impact. 2 things can happen with that. One, it stays in the shield, making it really hard for the enemy to carry the shield moving forward, or the enemy will then have to abandon the shield because of this thing that's now in the way. So this will now be an advantage for the Roman soldier because now he has a soldier that doesn't have shield. So the legionnaire would carry 2 of these, not 1. So it's actually going to have 2 of these. Okay. Okay. That? Okay. Carry that to the side. Like that. And, yeah, carry with 2 hands. Okay. You got it? Perfect. I got it. You got it? I don't think you do.
I got it. Yeah. That's it.
Okay. Now, very important. The reason why the furka was set up the way it was, one of the reasons is that, I mean, think about it. They could have, you can see, Zach's got both his hands full, right? It would have made sense if he had a backpack of some sort. This way, it would have strapped him on his body, and then he could free one of his arms at least. But they didn't do that. Why? Primarily because in the event of an ambush, remember, these people were marching constantly, and he was attacked, he could simply let go, and he would be free from this load. Versus if he had strap on a backpack, he would then have to like get the straps up. That could take a second or two, and every second counts when you be attacked. So this is one of the reasons they opt with this setup, and it actually turned out to be a pretty effective way of carrying their equipment. How do you feel, Zach? Tell me. Be honest with you.
It's pretty heavy and then uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable. Okay. All right. Yeah, it can be comfortable if you know how to like hold it in place, but I know it gets hard to get used to.
All right. Yeah, I'm gonna try to wear it every day so that
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Oh, you know what? Let's just carry one.
Okay.
Carry one. All right. And then and Zach's gonna demonstrate.
Yeah, I don't think any parsing is attacking us today.
Yeah, no parsing. Yeah, being a legionnaire is not easy. Okay, so try to like that. Like that. Perfect.
So, okay.
Now Zach's gonna demonstrate walking. He's not gonna walk 20 miles. Are you?
To take the phone out, and then what you can do is
I'm gonna rotate it.
No. What you can do is take the phone out. Let me show you. Can you hold this for a second? And then as I'm walking, you're gonna be just pointing the phone toward me. Here, hold this. All right. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do rotation. So now you're gonna take the phone, and as I'm walking, you can just take it.
What?
Here.
We don't have to take it out of the tripod.
No. You just point, and I'm gonna walk.
Okay.
You just hold this, and I'll hold it. Sorry. Just point toward me.
Yeah. Do you mind like filming it? Well, okay. Yeah. Just film. Hold on. Let me set you up. Yes. Good. It should be more comfortable, right? Yeah. Very much more comfortable. It should be as close to as possible. Okay. March, soldier.
There you go.
Yeah. Keep going to Wendy's. Averte. Forward.
What does Caesar say? I come and I see, I conquer.
Yeah, Vine, Vice. Came, I saw, I conquered.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us, how was that little, 20 feet?
It
Not
was
too bad, right?
not too bad.
Exactly.
It was only 20 feet. Yeah, I wasn't doing
20 miles, right. But it's something that they train for.
Right.
And
they were in shape.
they were in shape.
Outside
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, so that's kind of what the marches were. They were constantly marching 20 miles a day, supposedly, and then they would set up camp at the end of the day, somewhere around 3-4 o'clock. Anyway, what don't you like? What do you think is
So Kalagi or the sandals feels a little bit uncomfortable. It feels almost like walking on the floor.
okay?
And
Because there's no heels.
There's no heels.
Yeah, it's flat. Completely flat.
It's flat. So I'm probably thinking there's a lot of flat-footed people, or
Maybe.
yeah.
Maybe.
And also I think Kalagi also were not designed for left and right feet. I think it was a uniform.
Yes. In fact, I don't think it was rights or lefts until much, much later. I feel like Civil War, if I heard that correctly. But we didn't have rights or lefts in shoes for a long period of time.
Shield feels comfortable, and
Okay.
I feel like it's easier to swing.
Okay.
And it covers the whole body.
Okay.
The backpack almost very light. I mean,
Good,
depending
good.
on what they used to carry.
Good. Before. Yeah, when it's set up properly, it's a lot more comfortable. Before, I guess we weren't holding it right, but yeah, how's the helmet feel?
Helmet feels
Okay.
a little bit heavy, but it's not. It's
Just gotta
not
get used to it.
unbearable.
Yes.
Do
You feel warm?
I don't feel warm actually.
Okay.
That's probably why it was set up.
Question came in, what was worn during cold weather?
Great question. So they actually would have a cloak. This right here was a cloak, or it was also a blanket. They had a blanket called a sagum or a punana, which was kind of like a poncho. The Roman, particularly in areas like Britannia and Germania, where they colder climates, they actually had pants called braque. The Romans didn't like pants in general, but they wore them because they were colder climates. But typically, in where he is, let's say Mediterranean, Greece, Egypt, he would have had just this setup. However, keep in mind in places like the Mediterranean, these rings could get really hot in the sun, and they will make it really warm. So I want to believe that they took them off when there was areas where they knew they were safe and they were in hostile territory. They would have probably worn just a tunic, maybe just a helmet, but yeah, who knows for sure. That's that question. Okay, so now let's talk about the camp. Now after we march 20 miles a day into the frontier, I'm hungry, right? We gotta eat. We gotta feed these soldiers. We'll talk about the rations, and so forth. Now they would set up their tents with goat hide. There was a group of soldiers called the Barbarian, and that was an 8-soldier group. Okay, let me just go over the whole legion structure. Let's just say 5,000 men. Sometimes it's 4,800. In that legion of 5,000, there would be 10 cohorts of 500 men. Okay, and each one of those cohorts would have 10 centuries of 80 to 100 men. Okay, which were commanded at one officer known as the centurion. And then in that century, there would be 10 groups of 8 known as the Barbarian. This was like a little band of brothers, if you will. They shared a tent together. They shared the chores, the duties, and the everyday rations. So, like I said, one of the requirements, one of the things that was given was plenty of food and water and stuff like that, and armor, of course, to be deducted from that pay. Now, we know that the legionnaire would consume about 3,000 calories per day. 75% of their diet was grain, stuff like barley or wheat. The other 25% might have been animal proteins such as lamb and salted pork, lentils as well. So each one of those 8 soldiers, as I explained, which is known as the Barbarian, would have had 1 slave and 1 mule at their disposal. It's very likely that the mule would have carried the tent and the tent poles, and they also carried this thing right here, which is basically a handmill. This is nothing changed from today. This is back in the day. They would actually put the grain in here and just grind it to make flour to eventually make the bread. So, Zach, can you demonstrate how that's done? Just get some grain in there. Sure.
The grain goes in the hole.
Yeah, and then now, grind. Now, it would take an estimated 3 hours for the soldier to make enough grain for the 8. You have to go faster. And they would make their own bread. Bread was their main source.
Sergio, your voice is, we're losing your voice.
Losing your voice.
Oh, sorry. I was saying that bread was their staple food, right? They would make bread constantly. Grain was obviously not just for soldiers, but Romans in general. It was subsidized. It was a major part of their diet. Major. More than meat and anything else. Yeah. So, did you get the part that said that it would take around 3 hours for this one soldier to make enough grain for the soldiers? Okay, so now let's see how Jack's doing right now. If he's not doing good, he's not going to eat. All right, not too bad. So we have some flour here. See, that's fresh flour, folks. But yeah, this takes a lot of work to do. And once they did, we'd have some nice bread right here. What else? They also ate lentils, which is a great source of protein. You want to try some lentils?
Yeah, I'll try some lentils. No salt, no pepper.
That's right. And then here's some Roman wine called Polska. It's just basically a really watered down wine. Because remember, wine goes bad as you open it and you go on campaign.
No, I can't drink. It almost feels like
watered down.
Mostly water.
Yeah, that's what it is. Basically, the wine would have been used for 2 reasons, along with the vinegar. The water, you got to remember, it wasn't always safe to drink. So having water or wine on the water that they're drinking would have made it a lot more safer in case there was microbes or bacteria in there. So that's a major part of why they carried the wine, not just for like pear and stuff like that. Here are some other stuff that they had in everyday rations. This is the oil lamp. which they would put the olive oil. They had Roman dice to play games. This is a flint striker to make the fires. A little utilitarian knife. These are sort of like a scissor. This is a writing tablet. Basically, it's a wooden tablet with wax. You would write things on there. Most likely, just keeping notes. Perhaps if you lost money in a gambling game or something like that. You know, there was literacy in the army. This right here is a unique thing. At this point in history, there's no soap, and we know that the Romans really pride themselves with bathing and cleanliness. They really enjoyed, going to bathhouses and keeping clean. So one of the ways they would do that, they would actually pour olive oil. Let's say I have olive oil, and I pour it all over my body, and then they would just scrape it off, or have a slave do it for them, depending on their status, and that's how they keep themselves clean. This is not necessarily a military thing. This is just a Roman utilitarian thing. And then there's this fun thing right here. I don't know if anybody knows. You know what this is?
Yeah, that's wipe your ass.
There you go. Roman toilet paper, folks. It's a sea sponge. It's pretty much use your imagination. I don't need to tell you. Well, I can tell you there was no Costco then, so nobody was buying toilet paper. This is Roman toilet paper, folks. Don't worry, it's unused.
But people were about to use it in the fall because there was no toilet paper.
Yeah, exactly. So there you go. Homemade toilet paper. Another thing that we have in like my mystery section is these little stakes right here. Soldiers carried anywhere between 1 and 2 of these. They were anywhere between 4 or 5 feet long. They had a pyramid shape and a little handle, if you will, in the middle. But the mystery is we don't know what they were used for. It's still a mystery to this day. There are some theories of why and how they put to use. The more common one is that they had made several of these and they would tie them together and made kind of like a hedgehog. Think of like D-Day, something like a barricade when they would be, if they were ever to be attacked while they're in camp. Another theory is that we know that the soldiers had a perimeter. They would dig around the camps. They would dig a perimeter, a ditch, let's say 5 feet deep, before they enter the camp, and they would stick these in the bottom of the ditch. So if somebody was to fall in, would be an intruder, they would meet the end of this point. And then when the soldiers left the camp 2 days later to go somewhere else, they would have taken them with them because they're a lot lighter. But again, these are just theories. Nobody knows for sure what these are. So this is extra credit, folks. Anybody can figure this out. I know, Dak wants to know, I want to know. What the hell were these used for? What else? Any questions about anything?
So, Sergio, you have the distinguishment of the army rank using the
crest
feathers, right?
This is a crest. Yeah, this is a crest. Yes, crests were used in 2 examples, maybe more. The crest that was used that goes side to side like this would have been a centurion. He's the one I mentioned earlier that would command anywhere from between 80 to 100 men in the century. And then there was another soldier called the Alpio, which would have been like his deputy, and he would have had it from front to back like this. This is made of horsehair, but there's also ones that were made of feathers and so forth like that. They were different colors. Red is the more iconic one that people think about, but they were actually had stripes. They had black. They consider it white, but crests were red.
So I'm an enemy, and Roman soldiers attacking me, and I see somebody, a centurion, wearing this. Wouldn't I want to disguise myself? Because if centurion is lost in the battle, then I guess cohort is no longer viable.
You would think that, but no, that was not. Centurion was a very revered, hated, ruthless, and very respected at the same time soldier. He received double the pay. He was a lifelong soldier. He was one of the ones that were allowed to marry. Enlistment, such as yourself, weren't allowed to be married. Centurion was. So this was a career soldier that was proven that had merit in every way possible. It's not like the other soldiers, the higher ups that don't engage in battle. No, this centurion was the captain. He was as likely to be killed as the legionnaire himself. So no, I don't think who's to say if they had the crest at all times? But I think that's a very important part because that's how you recognize them. Right?
How long did it take from being a regular soldier to a centurion? How many years
or was it merit based?
I think it varied from case to case. I would say over at least 10 years, you'd have to have certainly, you'd have to have high merits and ranks. Admirations from the emperor even and magistrates. You couldn't just become a centurion. You'd have to be recommended to that. So centurions were definitely a career soldier, a respectable part of the army. I would say so.
Question
I
came.
got some questions
How is
in
the
the chat. I got some questions in the chat. Is this a good time for them?
Yeah, go ahead.
So first, when did the Roman army start recruiting barbarian soldiers?
Well, when you say barbarians, you mean non-Romans, like non-citizens?
James Kelly wrote the question. Maybe he can say what he meant.
Yes.
So when I would say there were always, perhaps in the late Republic, and I'm just guessing that, there was always incentives to having people with other specialties. Let me explain. The Roman area of focus was a ground type of soldier, boots on the ground, and he was a builder. The Romans were not much into archery or cavalry. They didn't really use, and not to say they didn't know how to use a bow and arrow or ride a horse, but that really wasn't their focus. They would usually outsource those things. So we know that the Numidians, which is in North Africa, were really great horse riders and breeders. And so a lot of their cavalry units, the equests, were from that region of the empire. And then as far as the archers, they had a lot of great archers from the island of Crete, as well as Syria, where Syria made these amazing bows called compounds, which used as a sinew, wood, and horn, and it would be very powerful weapons. So they used allies all throughout, I would say, late Republic, maybe well into the empire.
What about Balearic
Slingers? Yeah, for sure. They had Thracians. They had a lot of Macedonians. The incentive was this: these soldiers, the auxiliary forces, they were not paid. They would get food ration, but they wouldn't necessarily get paid, and they were also responsible for equipment and armor, kind of like the pre-Reformation. However, after 20 and 25 years of service, then they would gain citizenship. So that was their incentive. It was a big deal to be a citizen in Rome at this point in time. So that was something, obviously, they looked forward to. But yeah, they're sure that is.
Another question. In the context of Roman soldiers having to be landowners as a prerequisite for service, very often Roman soldiers were given land for 20 years of good service. Example, Roman soldiers who served in Egypt were given land on the Castia de Nîmes next to the Rhone. Was there a change in this requirement over time?
Well, yes, during the Reformation, they stated that they were given land later into when the army changed. I believe that's what he suggested. In the beginning, they were required to have land to enlist, but at some point when they changed it, the Reformation, you did not get a requirement. You did not have to acquire own land. Furthermore, at some point, they would also be given land to other faraway legions, as the gentleman explained, in Egypt.
Can I make a comment on it myself?
Oh, by all means.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff, you need to have some political context. So the reason that Marius removed the land requirement was because the Senate denied him the right to recruit Roman soldiers because he was involved in a political dispute with his army commander, who was an old style aristocrat, and Marius, what was called a new man. He was a guy whose ancestors had never been in the Senate, and he was discriminated against, as were all new men. So he was forced, and Marius made that worse. He was a provocateur. So Marius was forced, and this was an innovation to get around the limitation that the Senate was trying to cripple him and make him unable to succeed. So that's why he went and started recruiting what was called the head count, defined as people who were so poor that they could not even own one slave. Right. And a second question on the barbarian question, there was also a good motivation for army commanders to recruit not army commanders, but really high people, and I'm talking about emperors and people who are contenders for emperors. If you made an elite guard of, let's say, Germans, for example, then you had a group of people who had no other political roots, had no other support it was a way to avoid coups. It was a way to avoid rebellions, because if you recruited Germans, they were entirely dependent on you for their existence. They had no loyalty to other aristocratic German factions. So for a Roman commander, it was a way of insulating himself and protecting his own security. And I'll say that same thing was done in Constantinople with the Varangian Guard and the Swiss pikemen who guarded the Pope. Is the same basic idea.
Yeah, I agree. There was a lot of politics in all those decisions. Because and as you pointed out, Paul, he was very Marius, right? He had a respect and command in the military and stuff like that.
On the question of awarding soldiers with land, that was also highly politically charged, because it was necessary to get the Senate to approve the actual donation of the land. So once again, if you were unpopular with the Senate for whatever reason, then they would screw you by not donating land. So the great example of that was Pompey. And the first triumvirate, which involved Pompey and Julius Caesar and Crassus, one of the things that held it together was the agreement that Caesar would push Pompey's land bill through the Senate, because Pompey was politically inept. Caesar was politically gifted. And so Caesar, who at that point was a relative nobody, was able to make himself important by being able to grease the wheels for Pompey. Because if the general could not supply land for his veterans, then he was politically discredited. He would lose their support and he would become a nobody in politics.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So one of the things I was asking Sergio is, how does this, how did Roman soldiers fought with the gladiators? And Sergio,
well, it's a thruster weapon. You just go forward and hold the shield.
So when we bring the shield, just kind of
yeah, I'll show you.
Yeah. Guys, don't repeat this at home.
No, you good. Just make sure your pants are up. So yeah, the shield will protect it like this. You draw it, and then kind of like a hacking whip. Let's just say like a human chainsaw. That's for the most part. I'm sure at some point when they broke rank, they would have used it more freehand. But ideally, it would have been used with the sword and shield like this. This is a very common stance.
How did people stand in the Legion? Like I was the second legionnaire, I don't have a second shield. How far was I from the other person?
Close enough. I would say, yeah, they had a good distance, but they wouldn't hit each other. They would definitely have enough space between the two. Yeah.
During the attack, would I have to be next to each other, like during the Spartan time?
I don't think they made shield walls like what you're thinking of.
Yeah.
Unless they did the testudo stance where they kind of
that's a turtle.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that's more Hollywood. I don't think they used it as much as we believe. I'm sure there is. I kind of got there are images of that, but it wasn't like their main stance. They fought in columns, blocks, and they would engage the enemy. As I said, they throw the pilum, then they would wait for commands and advance, and that's how.
Sergio, maybe you want to comment on thrusting versus slashing.
Yeah, so thrusting is the blade is not typically sharp on the edges. So we know that, so it's very pointy in the front, so it's definitely a thruster weapon. I mean, could we say they never slashed? We don't know, but I typically, as I demonstrated as a little demo, it would be sword side to the shield and advance. The idea is to stay with your unit. The way this whole thing is set up is not set up to be fought, to fight it as an individual. This is not a duel. This is to be fought as a unit. Everybody has to follow their commands, their orders, and that's how it works. If you lost your shield, if you got out of the formation, you were doomed, and they probably wanted that. They didn't want you break away from the machine that they were establishing.
So maybe you could comment on movies that show Roman combat as if they were each individual slashing left and right wildly. Most of the movies depict Roman combat like that.
This is true. This is absolutely true. Yes, that is not an ideal way to fight, especially not their style. They stayed close together. They were very, very conformed, rigid. The movies where we see the chaos of war, I don't believe that happened. I don't believe that happened. Even with the Greeks, I think it was very, very regimented. I'm sure at some point they would break formation. Let's just say they're retreating, that the enemies are retreating. They would probably mow them down with their horses. But for the most part, if they're properly fighting the way they're supposed to, you would see Zach right now, as you do, with the shield and the sword, and he stays there. Picture 8 more guys to his on the side and a whole bunch behind him, and that's it. They don't really move much other than that. And again, if it's properly done, I'm sure there were times where they couldn't keep up that fighting style. But ideally, yes, that they didn't fight like what we see in the movies. I don't think anybody thinks.
And let me say that it's a question of scholarly debate right now of how much space was there laterally between Roman soldiers. And that relates to the whole question of slashing. If you slash, then the guy next to you better not be close because he's going to accidentally get cut.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So it really, a slashing weapon is really destroys the idea of fighting as a large unit.
100% is what I said, that if there was any slashing, we don't know. It would be after they broke the formation. In other words, let's just say they got attacked by the cavalry unit or somehow the barbarian would advance, and all of a sudden now Zach is on his own and he's away from the group. Then he might slash. But if he's in the group following the commands, no, he wouldn't be able to slash.
So you might say that at the point that a Roman soldier started slashing, that was usually very, very bad news or very, very good news. Either they had won, or more likely their own line had been broken and they were desperately fighting after their own formations had been destroyed.
That's correct. That is correct. The idea of the Roman soldier wasn't a tall or strong or fast individual by any means. It was the fact that they all fought as a unit. They knew how to follow the commands. They had a very systematic way of fighting. That's a simple. And they were focused on other things other than warfare. Okay, while other armies were working on tactics and weaponry, the Romans definitely focused on that as well. But they focused on logistics, engineering, stuff like this, getting enough water, supplies, the supply chain, and stuff like that, the tents, all the equipment. Those are really important things for the Romans. I mean, what good is having soldiers 5,000 strong if you can't feed them, or you can't provide water, or you can't provide sanitary conditions in case there's a disease or an outbreak? That, to me, is one of the keys to their success. That is what I think is the biggest takeaway of the Roman army. Sure, strength in numbers was certainly important, but it was the whole rigid, the discipline, and the logistics that they heavily focused on is what made them successful.
One more thing I wanted to add is Hollywood always assumed that Roman shields and Roman outfit was red. It's not always the case. It's whatever the soldiers can afford. So the soldiers used to get paid salary. You used to get paid in salaries. And in fact, for you to buy a new cloak, it was taken 1 annual salary to buy a new cloak. It's very expensive. It was extremely expensive. So what soldiers used to do is they would fix their cloak. So sometimes you would see a lot of ripped cloaks and they're just like sewn back together. They would go to the market, and if they wanted to buy a new one, in fact, there was a type of hygiene or ethics within the Roman legion where the commander could come in and make a comment on somebody's cloak and say, "You're not pristine, you have to fix it." And sometimes, you know, they were gamble. Right? As Sergio had shown you, there was dice, so they would spend money, you know, on ladies, and they would go in Dacia, and they'll have good time with, you know, now current Romania, but it used to be Dacia, with ladies, and they'll spend money there as well. And some would keep money for
women are sexy, let me tell you. Anyway, another thing I want to point out, right now it's sort of raining, And one of the things that they had, I don't have it for this shield, but they actually had a leather cover made of goat hide for the shield. Okay. The reason is because the shield's made of wood, and if it got wet and then it dried, it would warp, which was terrible news because this shield is everything to them. This shield is so important to the Roman. It's mad. So they had covers for the shield and for the helmets to avoid them from getting rusted or warped in the rain. Again, going back to how the Romans thought, they were very pragmatic. They were very systematic. They were just thinking of everything. One of my favorite quotes of all time is from Benjamin Franklin. He said, those who fail to plan to fail. And the Romans 2,000 years ago were certainly thinking like that.
Here's another question. Wayne Rockman says, I read in Josephus that darts were used. What is a dart?
Well, there were these, think of a giant dart, maybe about 2 feet long, somewhere between an arrow. They had feathers on the end, and it just throw it, kind of like a sling action. I don't know how much that was used. There's not so much information on how that, but yes, they did have these darts.
And it also is a translation for javelin. It's an alternate translation for javelin.
Is it? Okay. I just know
It's
that they were.
It's a type of javelin. It's a thrown weapon.
Okay. I don't know why I thought somewhere that they actually had these little handheld, like they look like missiles in a way. But yeah, maybe it was.
Talking about Josephus Flavius, he did point out, especially during the attack of Jopata. I don't know if you know the story. I don't know how true it is. Josephus Flavius is the one that predicted that Vespasian will become an emperor. And Vespasian kind of laughed at him because during the time of Caligula, Vespasian was actually exiled to Judea to fight the Jewish rebellious. Josephus Flavius was one of the commander on the Jewish side and ended up defecting. So Jewish wars. Yeah. So the Josephus Flavius, we used to detail the Roman legionnaires. This is probably a side note, but every legionnaire used to have a little pigling walking with them, or at any point they would slaughter the pig and eat, obviously, so they had a livestock with them all the time. Obviously, Jews did not eat pork, so that's why it was interesting in his writings. He used to write that.
Yes, and there was also some writings that when they sacked the temple,
yes,
one of the Romans was running in the temple, which most likely they had marble floors or something like that, and he slips because the Kali guy has these little hobnails on it. And if you know that the Kali guy was made of pork skin, which is a big, exactly Jewish. So he fell because he was entered the palace with pork or pig skin. Right. Yeah. But yeah, no, I know that's just story of Jewish world.
Right. Another question from me. Maybe you want to talk about the grip on the shield, the difference between the Greek hoplite shield and the grip on the Roman shield.
Absolutely. I don't have a Greek. I had a pelta, but let's just say it's the hopline would have a brace here and then a handle around here. Okay, we're not sure what the rope is. Maybe Paul, but I don't know. It was more concave. Whereas the Roman one, the boss is in the center. Here, there's no grip or no straps to the arm like the hoplite one. This is just you hold it with your hand. That's it. The advantage of this is that you could move it. Let me demonstrate from side to side. See, I can move with the shield. I'm not attached. I don't have anything strapped to my arm, and that gives me a lot more mobility. And there's also a safety feature with that. If I had straps in the arm and someone's to grab the shield, I might go down with it. Whereas here, I can easily let go. It doesn't keep me, again, just like the Forca pack where it's not strapped to my arms, I can let go if worst case happens. And three, supposedly that you could probably use this as a weapon, whereas you could just punch somebody. Again, I don't know how much of that they did. Some people believe that that's the whole point of shield loss, but I don't see Romans doing that. But that's the advantage of having the shield grip in this fashion. Excellent question, Paul. And feel free to add in if you feel like I left some stuff out.
But just to say that there have been some reenactors. Reenactors are sometimes important for historical knowledge because they show you what you can and can't do. And there have been reenactment videos I've seen which show the hoplite grip being a tremendous liability if you're fighting alone, just because of the reason that you said you can't move it easily to protect your left side and your right side. And the Roman single grip, overcomes that problem by allowing you to move the shield much more flexibly to defend yourself. I mean, you're basically impossible for you to fight as an individual using the hoplite gear.
But yeah, okay, yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Shields, think about it. Shields are like everything. They're armor. You don't have a proper shield, or you don't have anything that does affect that make or break the livelihood of the soldier overall. We open up for.
So we're gonna open up for questions and let me mute everybody. Again, 31 seconds. Give you 1 second. I know people have been asking questions as it goes, but we have 20 people on, and so just be courteous, and if you can raise your hand, I'm gonna, again, like I said, unmute everybody. All right. Let me know if you guys can.
Yeah, I guess, but no, I think we're
Let me know, guys, if you could speak. I just unmuted everybody.
Zach, this is Robert. Thanks for hosting us. This looks awesome.
No, thank you, Robert.
I joined late because I had my other program, but this is really cool. Good
I
job.
appreciate it. Thank you. So anybody has any questions? Thank you, Robert, again, and always great collaboration with you.
How did the two of you get interested in this topic, and how long have you been collecting all this stuff?
I've probably been doing this for about 10 years.
Wow.
I love history as far as I can remember, and I just bought a Roman comic just to collect it, and I just realized there's a huge community out there that likes to explore the life and the daily routines of soldiers, and it just kept growing from there. So yeah, I'll say 10 years.
What about you, Zach?
Well,
Day one.
Day one, I'm wearing. Let's just say, I dressed like this going to the office. You will be there. Yeah, maybe during Halloween, but
Yeah, that wouldn't be very comfortable at Halloween.
yeah, I look. Yeah, it looks great at the moment, but I guess
Yeah,
it's awesome.
it's work to get on and get off if you're not ready for it.
Well, did I hear you say after this you're going to the subway and you're going to go to Times Square?
That's right, and
You'd probably get a really interesting response if you were at Times Square dressed like that.
well, I think naked ladies probably, they take the whole.
I've actually been asked.
Oh, really?
I mean, no, they tell me, why don't you go to Times Square dressed up as a Legionnaire? I'm like,
No.
I don't want.
What I like about Sergio,
or
obviously,
walk around the Metropolitan Museum of Art like that.
I did think of that. I did think I just greet people,
yeah.
but
As long as he doesn't go to the airport, because it will ring.
yeah.
Mark has his hand raised.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Mark, go.
Yeah, Zach, thank you for going through this in the hot weather, I presume, in New York. And Sergio, I had a question on the pilum.
Oh, hey, good to hear from you. Mark from Chicago, right?
Now
Oh,
New
he's
Orleans.
on-
Yeah, from Chicago, but now in New Orleans.
Oh, okay. All right. Good to hear from you, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, tell me.
So, thanks you for doing this. And I was wondering if you could be so kind as to pick up the pilum.
Peel him. Here. Here.
Demonstrate it.
Take. Oh, peel him. Yeah, 1 second. He's coming.
Yeah, no
Yeah.
worries.
I think we killed Persian before. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, you killed Persians? You're not supposed to do that.
Did I kill Persians?
No, the Parsians. Sorry.
Well, they would attack anybody that that was their preemptive strike. Let's say,
Okay.
once they engaged the enemy, they would have thrown them. It would have a cloud of these javelins going down and hopefully destroying the shields of the enemy.
Yeah, just don't get
Yeah.
too close to Persia. You might end up staying there a long time.
Persia, Parthia, yeah. I'll get cool.
Well, you're
Okay,
talking
so-
about process.
So you have the pilum in your hand?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Okay.
1 second. He's bringing it out right now.
Okay.
You know what's the other side of the film is actually pointy. Why is that?
Just a
So-
grip on the
Okay.
Okay, so it looks like there's a wooden shaft and then a metal shaft. I know that once you throw the pilum and it goes into a victim or in the soil, the tip bends, so it can't be thrown back at the Romans. It looks like the metal shaft could be removed and then replaced, or like the metal shaft could be recovered from a battlefield, or it could be replaced. Is that the case?
Let's see. I mean, yes. The wood is basically like it has an opening for the iron piece to slide right in, and then it will be two rivets and bolts. So you could, in theory, replace it, but the real work is the iron, not so much the wood. So one, I was just if it bended, which is likely would happen, would bend and impact. It couldn't be used back.
Well, I was thinking that if, like, after the battle was finished, assuming the Romans won, they could pick up those iron shafts, bend back the metal point in with a blacksmith, or carry replacement shafts.
Yeah. I would say if possible. I don't know if that's the fact or not, but yeah, I think in all battles in general, there are scavengers that look for arrowheads that are still good, weapons, shields that can be still salvaged or anything like that. So yeah.
I'm not even thinking scavengers. I'm thinking actually Romans. It's like, okay, after the battle, you guys go get the useful equipment and bring it back.
I don't know of that. I think Romans had a very specific role in a lot of things they do. Maybe they outsourced it to other people. Maybe remember they had a whole amount of people, merchants and vendors that would cater to the Romans. So it's very possible that people found metals. I mean, metals in general are always useful.
Rare.
Right?
It takes a lot of work. It's rare. It's a ton of work to get ore, to get into a metal. There's a lot of value add and there's a lot of value in that metal shaft.
And add that the Romans had blacksmiths as part of the military units. So they traveled with people that could do ironwork on
That makes sense.
in the field.
Yeah, kind of in the same way you'd have a tile and die and tool shop on an aircraft carrier.
Yes.
Okay. No, there was a huge economy that traveled with the legions. I mean, there's like I said, they carried most of their rations themselves, but they're always going to need other things, as Paul mentioned. Like there were people that could repair the armor. There's people that could sell you new tunics or repair the old stand kind of guy. Fine.
What about hospitals? What about
They had medics. They had medics themselves.
what about if somebody died on the field? What was their morgue, so to speak? Ethics. How did they collect the wounded?
You mean if they died in battle?
During the battle? Yeah. What was the policy of collecting the wounded? And
I believe they would have cremated them or they would have buried them.
Okay.
In the region. I mean that area.
Depending whether it was a Christian.
I don't think it was Christianity at this point. Not in the legions.
180.
I mean, I don't know if it had such a strong influence in the military.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't see significant numbers of Christians in the military until like the 4th century AD.
Exactly.
With Constantine?
Yeah, exactly. As a Constantine. But at this point, they might have been, they celebrate worship different cults like Mithras.
Right.
That's a very common deity.
Right.
But as far as funeral practices, I think they would have buried them right wherever they were. There was no like today's modern.
We should point out that burial of the dead was extremely important in all Roman era religions. I mean,
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, this was considered, an obligation of the living towards the dead.
Right. Yeah.
Because if you think about other religions, right, so Menicians and Zoroastrians, they had, what they used to do is they used to bring the bodies for animals to feast on, because they said everything that, you know, basically that came to this world leaves it kind of like into the you know, flora and fauna, and has to live in the same way. So the crows and all that, you know, and then they will go and collect the bones and they put them in these little boxes.
Right.
And
Sarcophagus?
it's not sarcophagus.
Effigery?
It's I would think it was just
Some kind of like.
I think the technical word is an ossuary.
Yeah,
Ossuary, yeah.
That's the word I was thinking of. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
yeah. So I was just thinking, you know, obviously, if the Romans cremated them, they probably must have had something, you know, set up automatic, just like in the hospitals, where just throw bodies in there, and there would be a lot of bodies, right? 10, 20,000 people at sometimes, like when during the Armenian you know, slaughter in the Teutonic whatever Teutoburg Forest, that was at least 20,000 people. Yeah. So
they would have buried them for sure.
And also, I mean, the Romans had to win in order to have an opportunity to bury their dead. Right? In other words, if, you know, like as the example that Zach just gave of the Teutoburg Vault, the Romans didn't have an opportunity to bury their dead because the Romans were annihilated, and their corpses were abused by the Germans. Many of the Romans who lived were tortured to death, and they were not going to give the Romans burial.
yeah, one more thing that Sergio wants to show. Thank you, Paul. Sorry, it's the obviously sigil.
As one of their standards.
Yeah.
Why not?
So what was the importance of this standard in the Legion? And then if you lose the standard, what happens?
Well, the eagle is their main one. That represents the whole eagle Legion.
Right.
That would be a bad thing. If they lost that, they would be shamed, possibly might even be killed, some of them. It's not a good look for any Legion to lose the Aquila, the eagle standard. The other ones, we're not sure, like they had another one with the discs, called the Sagum.
Right.
We're not sure what that represents. It might be a cohort, but we don't know. This represents an attachment. So if they would break up in a unit and like patrol in another area, they would carry one of these. But yeah, there were different standards. Some represent the emperor himself, some represent other things. But the eagle was the most important one. They did not want to.
You could say that in ancient images, you'll see only one eagle, but you'll see multiple of those sigils.
Oh, that.
So, you know, there's definitely only one eagle for a legion, but I think that clearly the sigils represent smaller tactical units.
I see.
Yes.
Oh, so yeah. One more thing. I know Joe Joyce, if you can unmute yourself, is our military tactician. Would you be able to opine a little bit on the army strategy or
No, you guys did a great job. I do have one question. Sergio, how does command and control work? I mean, I imagine Zach can't hear a lot with that helmet and the clanging going on. You know, what do they do beyond the Centurion? I mean, who are their sergeants in effect?
Okay, so to answer the question, this helmet is an earlier one, but there was one that had an ear opening. Remember at the map I was discussing? So they had opening ears, and that was very important. And you could hear, right? You could hear. We definitely underneath Korean, he had a definitely called the Altio, and he would definitely command a lot of the men. Let me show you one of the ways to use it.
You know, while Sergio's getting it, you know, if you guys have an opportunity, go to our YouTube channel. We'll post this there as well. It's fitness history investing on YouTube channel. Just type those three words together and it'll pop up. Thank you.
Yeah, this is one of the standards that I was talking about, the Sigma. We don't know what it represents, but they had multiple discs and a crescent in the bottom. Sometimes they have a little plaque with something written in the cohort. But yeah, this is something that would mark. But there would be multiple of these as well. Now, getting back to Joe's question. So the Optio they would have a staff like this, okay? And the object of this was to tap the men in the back. Say you to the back. It was like a pointer. This was used. So if there was too much noise, too much chaos, and they couldn't really hear it, they'd feel it. You would know just by the tap in the back. It's not a weapon. It's just basically a staff to let them know how to maneuver them.
On the question of command and control on a larger level, the legions were an important vector of literacy because the Romans used written orders. So it was actually necessary for legionaries who were non-commissioned officers to learn to read. And that's kind of a unique feature of the Roman legions. They actually spread literacy throughout the Roman regions.
Yes. And when we think about how long ago that was, what we'll see later in the 6th, 7th century, literacy was, maybe they weren't as literate as the scholars or the scribes, but nevertheless, yes, that's a great point, that they knew basic numbers and mathematics and stuff like that, which I think was pretty fascinating.
Yeah, so you needed a certain level of intelligence to function in any sort of, non-commissioned officer role in the Roman army. Education and aptitude.
I agree. They whatever. I think one of the key things with the Roman army or Romans in general was that if they saw something that they liked from somebody, they would take it from them, not in a physical sense, but intellectually. They'd reproduce it, they'd improve it, they would take it, and everything from religion to weapons to engineering. To everything. I mean, there's very few things that are actually Roman in itself. Most of the stuff either came from the Greeks, the Etruscans, the Celts, possibly Egyptians. They were good at borrowing ideas and really exploiting them to their advantage.
They were like the Apple and Microsoft, stealing their idea.
I guess, but that has to be Apple if they're dominating the market, right?
That's right.
Well, no, maybe Microsoft. I don't know. But yeah, I think that's one of the keys to their success,
Yeah. So, I mean, I really want to thank Sergio, and we will in the future do more stuff like this. I mean, it takes time. Obviously, it takes effort. Taking this time. I really appreciate everybody joining today. Just wanted to go a little bit over our future postings. Like tonight, we have the Asian philosophy at 7. Tomorrow, we have politics of a 100-year war. So Sergio did a presentation on the weaponry of a 100-year war. And there was a big appetite to people understanding politics. Obviously, people wanted to know more about the politics. Sergio did an incredible job, and Greg helped us as well. So it was an amazing presentation, but there was more appetite to understand more politics. And so we created another one, and Andrew, who is a history teacher, is going to be presenting that one tomorrow. And at night, we do something different. We're going to do a virtual tour of Persepolis, and everybody knows Persepolis is the capital of ancient Persia during, Archimedean Empire, and they will be done by a graphic designer / YouTuber. His name is Batman from Australia, and in the future we'll collaborate and do virtual tours of ancient capitals of the world. And Sergio is going to be involved, and we're going to use his voice and understanding of the paradigms of Roman and Greek Empire. And so do join us. And on Monday we'll continue on Greek philosophy. We're going to be talking about Plato and Socrates. And then, next week we'll do Spartacus. Was it true? Was it not? So do look at our schedule for meetup, and do join our YouTube channel. And anybody that wants to thank us, so I can take Sergio for nice beer and ice cream restaurant. So on the YouTube channel, there's a little button called "Thank You." You could, there's a little 50 cents or nothing, or just say thank you. It'd be great as well. Really appreciate everybody to join today, and I'll see people tonight, if not tomorrow, if not next week. But we will, we have a lot of very exciting presentations coming up, and definitely with Sergio's more of this reincarnation. Everybody have a nice day. Sergio, you have last words you want to say?
No, thank you everybody for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I hope it was enjoyable for you as it was for me. And yeah, I hope to see you in the next one. All right. Take care,
Last
everybody.
question for Sergio.
Yeah.
What do your neighbors think?
We're exposed. No comment. I don't know. You know, they don't keep their comments to themselves. I think they think it's great. I think people that really don't know about like history or that there's another ways to explore history, when they realize, oh, there's replicas, ways to, you know, reenact stuff or learn about it through actually wearing the stuff recreating. I think they find it really neat and interesting. So
Sergio, that's good for you, but what about Zach?
Maybe one of them's watching. Maybe one of the neighbors is watching out the window on Zoom.
Thanks, guys. That was great. Thank you.
Thank you so
take
much.
care.
I appreciate it.
See
Thank
you
you.
guys.
Have a nice one.
Thanks, guys. That was awesome. Bravo.